moments we're going to be looking at a video that is going to kind of capture where I'm going this morning. And even though the audio in the video is not that great, pay more attention to the video itself. Follow the storyline, because as we walk through the message together, each part of that video, I'm going to transition into our message entitled Reaching Our Generation. What are we doing to reach the generation around us? Now, as I share some points in this message, I'm speaking about the church in general, not so much Turnpike Wesleyan. And even though we're doing a great job in building bridges to our community and reaching our young people, we know even here we can do a whole lot better, can't we? In fact, if we're doing the job we ought to be doing, our place should be full in our 8:45 service and our 10:30 service. However, as we set the groundwork, kind of set the springboard for this message, I have a video. You watch. Apparently there's technical problems again. Well, maybe we won't be seeing the video. You know, it's really odd how technology works. Is in the first service, everything went without a glitch. So what's the difference between the first service and the second service? I don't know, the minions might be different inside the computer, right? Well, don't worry about it, guys. We'll just go ahead and move on. And I'm going to read the scripture for you, and then I'll try to reflect upon a video you did not have a chance to see. 1 Corinthians chapter 9.
Turn your mic on.
Okay, got it? Okay, 1 Corinthians 9, 19 through 23. Hopefully we can bring up the PowerPoint so you can fill in the blanks to your sermon notes. But as I mentioned before, even if that doesn't happen, go to the website, go to the media page, and there you can download actual outline with all the blanks filled in. 1 Corinthians 9, 19 through 23. Even though I'm a free man with no master, I become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. When I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. When I was with those who followed the Jewish law, I too lived under the law. And even though I'm not subject to the law, I did this so I could bring to Christ those who are under the law. When I was with the Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish law, I too lived apart from that law so I could bring them to Christ. But I did not ignore the law of God. I obeyed the law of Christ. When I am with those who are weak, I share their weakness, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessings. Now, one thing I want to mention before you mistake what the Apostle Paul is saying here, he wasn't saying that he compromises the gospel of Jesus Christ. He wasn't saying he compromises his own character or the fact that he's been transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. What he's saying is he's trying to find common ground so that he can share and present in an attractive way the gospel of Jesus Christ. So as we take a look at this particular message, I was reminded of a Catalyst conference that took place in Atlanta, Georgia, not too long ago. Andy Stanley was the speaker there, and of course he was speaking to church leaders, pastors, staff, and other leaders, but he posed this question. It's very simple. What breaks your heart? Think of that for a moment. What breaks your heart? What is it that causes you to grieve? Then he framed the question with a statement. You don't have to change the world, but you have to change something. Interesting, right? His point was God didn't ask us to change everything. It's impossible for you and I to change everything. But he placed within our heart certain particular passions And it's those passions that should drive us to change something, to make changes right where God has planted us. So if posed with the same question, what would your answer be? Does your heart break for this very generation that He has placed you in? Does your heart break for young people growing up in a culture that's becoming increasingly antagonistic towards Christianity? Does your heart go out to these individuals? In fact, to a Barna research group who did this particular survey, they discovered from age 20 to 29, most individuals face many life-shaping decisions. So if you look at just this age bracket, 20 to 29, they're determining whether they're going to finish college, what career they're going to pursue, where to live, whether or not to get married, who they're going to marry if they make that decision, if and when to have children, among other critical, crucial choices. And in our culture of hyper-individualism, these decisions are being increasingly shaped by people's desire to determine their own personal fulfillment and purpose in life. So in other words, if you're in your 20s, allegiance to a Christian church is kind of an oddity. In fact, most don't enter the church unless it's by a casualty in their quest of trying to fulfill their own personal quest. Wow, that's pretty tough stuff, isn't it? Saying that young people aren't going to just naturally come to church. So if they're not going to come to church, how do we go out there and connect with them and touch them? Most in this age bracket, according to the Barna research, do not even give church a passing thought. So how are we going to reach those that, in all due respect, really don't care much about God or care much about the church itself? Well, let me pose this in the midst of these questions. If we're going to have this kind of outreach, it's going to involve a lot of sacrifice on the Christian, isn't it? It's going to involve also much of God's grace, and it's going to involve humility. We're going to have to swallow our pride, so to speak. It's going to involve focus. I think our scripture passage has a lot to say on how we can go about all of this. The Apostle Paul brings it to our attention. The first thing the Apostle Paul says is that when he's with a group of people, whether Jew, Gentile, or even the weak, he said, I try to find something in that setting so that I can begin to share with them, not lecture to them. How many here have been lectured to? What is your attitude usually after the lecture? Not very good, is it? Although I need to frame this, it's one thing for somebody to come and try to correct you if you're doing something wrong, as opposed to lecturing you. Let me explain the difference. If somebody comes to correct you, they usually come because they love you. They care about you. They want to invest in you. If they lecture you, they don't care about you. They care more about their own rightness and your wrongness. And they're just pointing out the fact that you're just wrong in their opinion. So to reach a lost generation in his day, Jesus often would share a story. Or he'd weave out a parable. And the whole purpose was to draw one's attention into the story. I mean, really just kind of bring you into the story. And then what would Jesus do? He always would drive home a spiritual truth with me. He'd take that story, capture the attention, and then drive home the message. Always there was a spiritual application. Jesus used storytelling to help people understand that they need to have a relationship with God. And that God wasn't some distant object out there. He was personal and wanted to have a personal relationship. That God was relevant, something to be grasped. Today, however, I think the church as a whole spend way too much time lecturing this generation. I mean, how many have heard the expression, you know what, the millennials or the 20-somethings, they're just lazy. How many have ever heard that? Okay, hands are going up. They're unmotivated. And you know they're not going up by the millennials or 20-somethings. Oh, not only are they lazy and unmotivated, they are so self-centered. And they're impatient on top of that. Well, you know, I read that list, lazy, unmotivated, self-centered, and impatient. And I thought, man, sometimes that's me. That's the way I can be oftentimes. So why am I lecturing others that have the same personality that I have on occasion? And this is the one that I have received down through the years. They don't appreciate church the way we do. And they don't appreciate our music the way we do. You've heard that one before, haven't you? Let's go back to the church setting. Not Turnpike Wesleyan per se. We're talking in a general sense. Why is it that young people have a struggle with the church of today? Well, for the most part, the church of today is still doing church the way it did 20, 30, 40 years ago. The way it did for their grandparents, the way it did for their parents, and young people, as they walk in, that is so foreign to them. It's so unnatural to them. And not only do they walk in and can't quite figure out the whole precept of this, oftentimes they're being scolded and lectured because they don't look or act or dress or whatever like everybody else. You know, the church, the early church in the beginning, was a church that changed her culture. It was a church that had tremendous influence. It was a church that relied upon the awesome power of the Holy Spirit. A church that focused on Jesus Christ and his ability to transform lives and transform even the world around it. In fact, it was such a powerful movement that the Roman Empire succumbed to it. Think of that for a moment. However, the church of today lets the world change it instead of it changing the world. Thus, the church has lost her power, her appeal, her significance. Therefore, it's no longer attractive to the generation that we are a part of. The church doesn't have the same power and appeal to those around. I want to ask the tech team, you think you can get the video going?
Probably not.
Want to try it?
Yeah, I can get this much going.
Get the video, Malene, and we'll see if it works.
I have none of that right now.
Or did you take the video out?
It took itself out.
We're going to try, because I'm getting right to the point where I want to talk about the video, and if it works, it'll be good timing after all.
Back to the future.
I don't even think they can find it. All right, well, we'll move on. The video I was going to share was the first episode of Back to the Future. How many have seen Back to the Future? Okay. The trailer kind of showed from the beginning all the way to the end. But let me give you the storyline since you didn't have a chance to see it. Dr. Emmett Brown is a research scientist, but also an inventor of sorts. And he finally had a lifetime dream become a reality. He literally made a time machine. And he was about to become the very first person to travel into the future. One problem, however, he had stolen the needed plutonium from the Libyans. And now, as he was getting ready to show off his machine to Marty McFly, the Libyans showed up to get back what he stole from them. So they shoot the doctor, and before anything else can happen, they're after Marty McFly. Marty jumps into the time machine, that's his only salvation, and then this race begins in a parking lot between Marty and the Libyans chasing him, and all of a sudden, as Marty is gearing up, moving into higher acceleration, he accidentally hits the time machine, but not to the future. He hits it to November 5th, 1955. Now, the year this was happening is 1985. So he goes back 30 years in time. If you saw the movie, you notice when he finally hits that hyperspeed, goes back to the future, he ends up inside an old barn. Well, the family, the Peabody family, come out to see what happens. Here is this DeLorean, which they don't have any concept of, in the barn. Marty's in this kind of radioactive suit, which looks like a space alien suit. So they assume this is an alien from a different planet. So Mr. Peabody goes in and gets his shotgun. If Marty had been shot up enough by the Libyans, now he's being shot by a farmer. He jumps back into the DeLorean, he takes down the road, finally gets to a street that he recognizes and realizes at that point, this isn't home. This is 1955. He goes all the way back to the year, which was the very year that Doc had the revelation for the flux capacitor that was the thing needed to propel them into the future. So here he is, now 30 years in the, not the future, in the past. He's not even born yet. Somehow he's got to fit in, although he is so out of place. Somehow he even has to get his mom and dad, who are his age, to fall in love with each other so that he can be born. And you know that if you watch the movie, it has all kinds of twists and turns. But if Marty McFly is going to get back to 85, he has to depend on Dr. Brown and his invention. You know, as I was thinking of this trailer, and I also have seen the movie, there are a host of young people out there that I think would be world changers if they were given the chance. I really do. In fact, I think there's a host of young people out there thirsting for Jesus Christ, even though they don't know it yet. Because God has placed a void in all of our lives that only He can fill. They're just trying to fill it with other things at this point in time because nobody has shared the message. Nobody's gone out of their way to convey the gospel. I think they're starving for the reality of God's power and grace. But like Marty McFly, oftentimes if they even sneak out of church, they enter a church that looks like 1955. And when they walk into the church in 1955, they're being shot at because their hair is a different color, or they have tattoos, or they have piercings, or something is on their body that doesn't quite appeal to the other members. You see, they're trapped in a church that's become complacent and no longer relevant. They're trapped in a church that looks to the innovations of the world for its survival, instead of the church being the innovators to a world to bring its change. So the first thing is we got to be careful that we don't lecture our generation, that we love them, that we reach out and try to touch them. But another thing about what the Apostle Paul was saying is that we need to make a connection. There needs to be a point of common ground. You know, with all the technology out there today, you would think that this would be the most connected generation ever, wouldn't you? I mean, we have Facebook, social media of all kinds. We have Twitter and Skype and FaceTime. We have the World Wide Web, and we even have these things called smartphones. In fact, I might want to take this message right now. Well, no, I'll wait. But we have all kinds of ways of being connected in the world around us. In fact, you folks have been very gracious in helping my son, JD, go to Haiti. He's going to be going pretty soon. I think his 4th or 5th mission trip there. But on his 2nd mission trip there, he said, "Dad, you're going to find this fascinating." He goes, "Not only were we in Haiti, but we were the most impoverished area of Haiti, where they had nothing, literally nothing. However, everyone had a cell phone. Everyone had a smartphone." He said many of them had better phones than I did. Can you imagine that? But despite all of this, we're perhaps the most disconnected of of all generations. One person wrote these words, and I quote, "Young people are tormented by loneliness, saturated by sex, fascinated with the dark side of the supernatural, and susceptible to suicide. We cannot abandon them. Their loneliness runs deep. Their home, oftentimes alone, raised by their music, by television, by video games. And they'll do anything to get that loving feeling, even if it's for just a night." So a lot of what's going on is not sexual, and it's not just about biology. It's really about intimacy, feeling close to someone, even if but for a few minutes. End of quote. Young people today struggle in this thing we call life. Many think it's pointless. Many believe it has really no meaning. Many of today's youth wonder why they're even here. What's it all about? And you know, when they can't find suitable answers to those questions, when there is no one to lead them to the fact that Jesus Christ is the answer, then they turn to all kinds of self-destructive habits to fill that void. Somehow, some way, you and I need to connect on their level. We need to find this thing called common ground, so not only can we gain their trust, but to also give them assurance that we truly care about who they are. Let's return to Back to the Future again. If you saw the trailer, you'll notice that now Dr. Brown is perched on a crumbling masonry ledge, 50 feet above the ground. He's on the Rock Hill, or the Hill Valley rather, clock tower. And there he is with a cable in hand, and he's trying to reach for another cable that runs up to a lightning rod, because at 10:04 p.m., lightning's going to strike that rod, run through the cable. That what he has in his hand goes all the way down to the ground, comes across the street about 10 feet high, and Marty is in that DeLorean, and when he hits that cable, the lightning must strike, everything must work accordingly, and the power is going to propel him back to 85. But there are so many things going wrong. Wind and rain, he drops the cable and he's wrestling around, but he's still got to bring that cable together. Now, what the doc didn't realize is that his life could have been at risk. By pulling that cable together, by extending himself in that regard, it could have killed him. But man, for Marty's sake, it didn't bother him one bit. So he worked diligently and he connected the cable precisely as the DeLorean passes by, and boom, Marty is set back, or actually to the future at that point, to 85. Well, you know what? None of that would have worked if it wasn't for one person willing to risk life and limb. So the question I pose is, to make a connection and to find common ground, what are you and I willing to risk? What are we willing to put at stake so that we can touch another life? And then finally, use the very present God has given us to change the future. You see, Marty was able to return to his present world. However, it wasn't the same. He did some meddling back in 1955. And some of that meddling he did in 1955 actually became to his advantage when he returned to 1985. Well, you know, that's our job this moment. What are we doing this moment? I don't want us as a church or a people to make an impression in our community. I want us to make an impact. I want us to actually be doing something positive, to influence lives in such a way that the future generation is going to be changed because of what you and I are doing right here and now. Well, the final part of the first of the trilogy of Back to the Future, Marty's with his girlfriend, who later becomes his wife. They're standing in the front yard, and all of a sudden the doc returns from the future in the DeLorean, and now it can actually hover over ground, and he pulls on in. He says, Marty, you gotta get in here. We gotta go back to the future. And Marty says, well, what's wrong? Is there something wrong with me? He says, it's not you, it's your kids. Wow. I wonder if this parent ever got that. No, you're not the problem, it's your kids. They're the problem. Well, what are we doing to provide a spiritually relevant community for our kids, for our young people? I would ask the praise team if they come back to the platform as I summarize what Paul was actually conveying in these verses. You know, Paul was very careful in expressing how we need to influence lives. We're not really going to do any good if we don't influence them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. However, Paul expressed Christ in such a way it was attractive. It drew people in. It made the gospel something to be grasped. It almost rings to the objective we have right here at Turnpike Wesleyan, to love Jesus so deeply, so passionately, that we express him vividly, with excitement and with determination. Paul found common ground with those he ministered to. He looked for similar goals or interests or activities. That's why I began with this passion. What is your passion? Take that passion and find a way in which you can connect with those that don't know the Lord. He never used a condescending attitude when talking to those around him. He humbled himself to identify on the very level of those he ministered to. And he made others feel accepted for who they were. You know, Jack Kemp said this: people do not care how much we know until they know how much we care. He developed a loving and trusting relationship with the people he ministered to, using the power of the Holy Spirit. In other words, Paul didn't use his own ingenuity. He always asked God to give him the right words, to help him as he began to speak. He was sensitive to the needs and concerns of each person, regardless of their background, regardless of their weakness. And then finally, he looked for opportunities to tell others about Christ. But not just to tell about Christ, but let others know that Christ is the solution to life's most perplexing problems. My friends, Paul wants us to be like that as we express Jesus Christ to the world around us. There's a community to reach. And one of the visions that I see happening is the day is coming, not so long in the future, where the Family Life Center goes up just across the road here, right across the parking lot. And think of this with me. While we're here on a Sunday morning worshiping, simultaneously in the building across the parking lot, hundreds of youth are worshiping alongside us. Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be almost the power of God upon what's happening at Turnpike? That's my dream. And I know that God is the one who can make that dream become a reality. Let's stand as we close in song.